Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. Before we begin, I'd like to review two items. Our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but we just ask that you're mindful of commentary remaining professional and on topic. For our event guidelines for today's session, it is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube where you're tuning in now in 48 to 72 hours. If you've not been on a live stream before through YouTube, you do need to have an account created there to interact in the chat. If you're unable to drop a question in right now, you can always feel free to reach out to us on Meetup and we'll get those questions answered for you. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Sydney Andrews, a Microsoft MVP. He'll be covering authoring DevOps pipelines using YAML and GitHub Actions. I'm going to bring both myself and him up onto the screen. Let's change that view. Hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on and doing another session with us. This is Sydney's second session out of 3. He's running a 3-parter for the month of March, which will end actually next week, April 6th will be the last one. As well as doing a Cloud Skills Challenge, which has been running all month. Sydney, I'll let you take it from here and get into a little more of the details.
So, hey, everyone. Really excited to have you back in part 2 of our 3-part series. If you haven't seen the first part, it's going to be on the Reactor YouTube channel. But basically, we are trying to accomplish something fun and great today and last week and next week. Last week, we really talked about Azure Resource Manager, using the Azure CLI to deploy templates, whether they're ARM JSON templates or Bicep templates. This week, we're going to talk about YAML, writing YAML and build our own GitHub Actions to automate various build and deployment tasks. And then, using the knowledge from this week and last week, we're going to Voltron it all together on April 6th. And I'm going to show you how to use GitHub Actions and Azure Resource Manager together to automatically deploy your Bicep templates to Azure. So saw somebody say hello from Toronto. Hello out there to everybody, no matter what time zone you're in. We're going to be back next week. I think it's going to be a slightly different time. But again, just super, super excited to really start on this. Now, here's the best part about today. It's all code. Some of this code I was had to redo pretty recently because I found more efficient ways to do things. So it's a little bit of fun excitement, a little bit of nerves for me. But when I say all code, I mean this slide I'm showing you on the screen is my only slide today because I am going to just jump right on in. I have my workspace. Essentially, I have the Azure portal open. I have my GitHub account open. I have Windows Terminal open to my downloads folder, and I have Visual Studio Code open to a March 0 folder. Let's CD Windows Terminal to that March 0 folder. And actually, you know what? I'm going to create a different folder for today. We're going to create a folder called March 30. Hopefully, I remember that name, and CD into that March 30 folder. And I'm going to open Visual Studio Code within this March 30 folder. That's what we're going to use today. Only reason, if you notice on my terminal, I had a open Git repo of March 0, and I didn't really want to deal with all of that. So, all right. So we have this empty folder. We have Visual Studio Code open to this empty folder, and we are going to jump over to GitHub, and I'm going to create a repository. Now I'm going to create this repository. Looks like a lot of other greetings: San Diego, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'm so sorry. And lots of good vibes going on in the chat. I'm going to create a repository and make the vibes even better. I'm going to go in and create a new repository in GitHub. I'm going to call this March 30, just because I like calling these the same name. Makes life a little bit easier for me. I am going to create this repository with nothing in it. So it's just going to be an empty repository. I'm going to copy the commands to initialize this repository. So I'll just copy those commands. We're going to use them in a second. Now, here in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to create what I need to create a GitHub Actions workflow. And that's essentially a YAML file that's in the GitHub/workflows folder. So .github, make sure you don't forget the ./workflows folder. Now, the name of this YAML file is completely arbitrary, but the idea here is that this YAML file is going to include the step-by-step instructions for what we want GitHub Actions to do with our workflow. So today, I'm going to call this Reactor.yaml just to show that the name is arbitrary. And from here, I'm going to create a workflow that's triggered when we push a commit to this repository. And I'm going to name this workflow Really Cool Reactor Demo. I'm going to save. And I know that when I commit this to GitHub, this is actually going to fail in GitHub Actions because it's going to need a lot more information. But what I'm going to teach you today is how to build that workflow from scratch. That way you understand every single command, every single step we're using. And it's not just me copy and pasting about 10 lines of script. Now, in the chat, we have a link to a Microsoft Learn module that you can try this all hands on yourself. We also have a link to a GitHub gist with what I call my show notes. Everything that I'm typing up, you're going to be able to see there. So if you want to run through this on your own at your own pace another time, please do so. All right, so we are going to initialize a new Git repo. I can go into terminal and type in git init, or I could just do it right here for Visual Studio Code. That's just equivalent running git init. I'm going to call this my first commit this reactor.yaml file, and it wants me to publish the branch. Now, if I do here, I got to do all the configuration. But remember, earlier, we copied how to push an existing repository from my local machine using the command line. Well, I've copied that, so let's go ahead and run that. Go to paste this from the internet, git remote add origin, git branch main, git push to origin, the main branch. Hit enter. And I haven't signed in yet, so it's going to ask me to sign in with my browser. Sign in was successful. And it pushed everything. That was pretty fast. Well, one of the cool things is if I go right back to GitHub, refresh, there is my GitHub/workflows folder, my reactor.yaml file. And since this YAML file is in that .github/workflows folder, it's automatically going to kick up as an action. You can always configure this, or if it's automatic or not automatic using GitHub settings, but we're just going to use the defaults here. Somebody asked a really great question. Are you using any Visual Studio Code extensions for the YAML? Today, I am not, and that's on purpose. I want you to see how to do this completely bespoke from scratch. 100% when you're writing this and you're writing with the theory of 1,000 projects, you're probably going to spin up a whole bunch of extensions to help you out. But for today, for completely academic reasons, I'm going to build this all manually. So I'm going to go to GitHub Actions, and we have an error, just like I predicted. Let's look at this failure. It says we didn't define any jobs, so we need an array called jobs to define some jobs. So let's go ahead and build that out. We're going to create a jobs array. And we can create our first job. So maybe I'll create a job called build job. And this is the unique identifier for the job called build job. So if I wanted to actually give it a name, I could do just like I did at the root and give this job a name. Build.net project. Save. And I'll call this commit create a job. It changes up from my local repository to GitHub. And then we are going to just jump in and go to actions. Now, create a job. It got up there, but it failed again. So what did I miss this time? Well, if I go to GitHub, it says, hey, we need an array called steps, and you need to define some steps in that array called steps. So going back, we're just going to keep building on steps. And just for fun, I'll create a step for .NET version, and I'm going to name this check .NET version. Now, this name parameter I'm always adding is just a best practice. You don't have to use it at all, but if you don't use it, it'll just use the identifier to name everything. So for the workflow, it'll be Reactor, since that's a file name. For the job, it'll be build-job. And for this step, it will just be called run because it's technically running a script. I just like to, from the start, use best practices of naming everything. All right, so check .NET version. Now, I expect this to fail one more time because I'm missing one more thing from the job. But what I'm showing you here is how we can debug our workflows as we're building them or when we create them. So go in here, check .NET version, and it says, hey, we were missing one more thing. Let me zoom down. The workflow is not valid because we're missing the property run zone. Now, it'll tell you which line I'm missing at, but essentially, we have a job called build job, but we're not telling it what type of OS we want it to run on. Run zone at the simplest level is specifying the OS. More technically accurate, especially if you're hosting your own job runners, it allows you to specify tags for the different runners. So basically, you wanted to run on something with these tags. For the built-in runners, there's tags for like Windows latest, Ubuntu latest, Mac OS latest, specific versions of each OS, and that's how they use their tagging system. And that's a really great way to do it. You can always have your own runners and use your own tagging system. But today we are going to run this on Ubuntu latest. Hit save, and we are going to run on Linux. I'm gonna change this, sync them up. There's nothing stopping me running this from Windows latest. I just arbitrarily chose Ubuntu latest. All right, run on Linux. This is my first valid YAML file. Notice that the just show you a couple things. First, workflow is called Really Cool Reactor Demo. This commit message is called Run on Linux. It runs a single job called build.NET project. And this job, first it sets up by grabbing a agent that runs that has the tag Ubuntu latest. Now you'll see that the environment agent grab was Ubuntu 20.04. Somebody said I'm using YAML VS Code extensions. I don't know if I have any of the extensions installed. Let's see. I think it's just a built-in YAML validation for VS Code. I don't see anything specific for GitHub Actions, but I'm glad people are bringing that up in the chat. There are extensions out there that gives you IntelliSense for all of this. But if you don't have any extensions installed, Visual Studio Code knows that it can do auto detect the file type and give you pretty good highlighting and formatting for that file type. Right now, it detected because my extension YAML that I'm authoring a YAML file. All right. Somebody says, hey, can we run jobs sequentially? Yes. You could definitely create another job, second job, and then you can build a relationship between the second job and the first job. Right now, I'm actually have to go look at one of my notes from when I've done this webinar in the past because I actually can't remember what the keyword is. So you're going to have to forgive me for this, but I believe the keyword is needs. And this is where you provide either one or an array of jobs that need to run before this job kicks off. So here, if I had a second job that wanted to run after the first job, I would need to indicate that it needs the first job to finish. You can also use conditionals to do that. The biggest thing is that by default, they'll run in parallel, but using that needs keyword is how we create a sequential order between jobs. All right, so saving things, we built this .NET project. Let's go into back into GitHub. One of the cool things is if you look at the agent, it has a GitHub page that tells you for this image, we have this software installed. So Node 1614. We have some package management stuff. I believe .NET's on here. Yep, .NET Core SDK 60200. So if I go in and go to check .NET version, it should be 60200. Pretty cool stuff. Now, what if I wanted to run a different version of .NET? So hub.docker.com what if I wanted to go in and say .NET SDK? And actually, I think it's is it just .NET? And I probably looking for the wrong thing here, but I actually have one of the funniest things that I do so much with .NET Linux container images to actually have this memorized. So I'll just search. I'll use Bing real quick. Docker Hub mcr.microsoft.com, which is Microsoft's container registry. .NET SDK. All right, so we have the Microsoft .NET SDK, and we have 6.0, which is the latest tag, but we have other tags you can use. So for example, if we want it on .NET 5, which is still supported right now, we could definitely do tag of 5.0. Let's do that. So I'm going to go in to my YAML file, and after runzone, I'm going to type in container. This allows me to specify a container. mcr.microsoft.com, .NET, SDK 5.0. Downgrade to .NET 5. Now, this is really useful if my team is using a specific version of .NET, and we don't really want to be tied to whatever version the build agent might have installed locally. So just show you what that looks like. It's going to run that same build.NET project, but here's what's interesting. Our agent is going to have one version of .NET installed on it, but it's going to initialize a container, run that container in Docker, and all remaining or all of the steps of that build are going to run within the context of that container. So that allows us to completely isolate things like this .NET version, which we isolated down to 5.0. For the rest of the demo, I'll switch this back to 6.0, but I just thought it was really useful to see that because if our developers are already using Docker container images to dev locally, this allows us to run in the same exact environment. Now, let's actually create a project and have a little bit of fun. So we have, I mean, it's not an empty folder. It has a workflow in it, but don't really have much else other than the workflow. We're going to go to Windows Terminal. I'm going to clear my screen so you can see a little bit more here. And I'm going to create a .NET new web app. This is just a web application, ASP.NET Core web app. .NET new get ignore, because I don't want to accidentally check in some things that I may or may not want into my Git repository. So we created a web application and a get ignore file. Here, you'll see that get ignore file is created and our web application. I mean, we can run it using .NET Run. .NET Run. We'll just double check, make sure I have everything set up correctly. So it's building the project and it's going to run it. If I select this port 5274 and control click, it should open my browser to the running application. Super simple stuff. So let's say we were publishing it. We wanted to share the bits out. Now, if we go in and we run the, let me stop this running application. We can use the .NET publish command. This allows us to publish versions of the application. There's some common flags you'll see is like the configuration flag. I'll publish this in release configuration instead of debug configuration. Now output flag, I'll publish this maybe to out folder. So I hit enter. And here's what I want to show you is going to happen. It created this brand new out folder with a published version of our application. This is pretty good because for debugger reasons, we might want to distribute this to our team. Or maybe we want to host this on a staging site. There's lots of things we could do with this published app. But one of the things you'll see right here is that this out folder is being included in Git repository. Don't really want to do that. So I'm going to go to my Git ignore, exclude output folder. And whether it's a capital O or a lowercase o, we'll exclude the out folder from a Git repository. That way, whenever we do our publish, it's fresh out files. It's not something that's been committed to the GitHub repository. All right, looks like another question came up. Is there a feature in Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code, to create and deploy the YAML file as part of publishing a web app? So a feature in Visual Studio to create a YAML file. I haven't seen that. That's not to say it doesn't exist. I just never ran across that. That part of the reason is because probably the YAML files are pretty specific on what people want to do. But that's a cool feature. Definitely could be something that's added in an extension. I built extensions for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code in the past, and that's not too terribly difficult to come up with. All right, so we have our YAML file, and we can actually run a publish of this. So we're going. The first thing we want to do is we want to use a GitHub Actions step. So instead of running a script, we'll type in uses. This allows us to use somebody else's action for GitHub Actions. Now, it could be any organization or repository. GitHub has their own actions organization with some of the most common actions you're going to see. So one of the first ones we'll use is checkout. And this does exactly what you think it does. It checks out code so that we can do things. Because at this point in our workflow, we check the .NET version, but we don't have access to our code yet. We need to check out that code. So here we'll use actions checkout, and there's all sorts of options. All of them are optional. Maybe you want to check out a different repository. Maybe you want to change like a token, all sorts of stuff. But we're just going to say uses actions checkout at, and I believe it was version 3. Let me double check. Yep, version 3, V3. We'll name this checkout code. Let's do another run. But this time it's a multi-line command because I like the readability of it. We're going to .NET publish configuration release output out folder. All right, so here's what we're doing so far. We checked the .NET version of the container. We're checking out our code from our GitHub repository to that build agent with no intentions of making any commits. We just get access to the code, and then we run .NET publish configuration release. Make sure I have the little symbol so it knows a multi-line command. I'll put out, and I'll name this one too. Publish .NET web application. All right, if my syntax is correct, our first publish will be the name of this commit. It looks like it's committing a whole bunch of JavaScript, CSS, and all the ASP.NET application files. So that sounds good to me. Sync the changes up. And if we jump back over to GitHub, we'll see our first publish is running now. So there's a build.NET project job. I just saw this posted in the chat. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. The first part we went over last week. We went deep into Azure CLI, Azure Resource Manager templates, and doing resource deployments to a resource group using those on templates, whether it's JSON or Bicep. Today, we're introducing GitHub Actions and kind of go over some of the basics. To next week, same day, maybe I think time's like off by an hour. We are going to combine the two together in a great Voltron. We're going to create a GitHub Actions workflow that deploys an ARM template. Specifically, we'll deploy a Bicep template, and we will create a GitHub Actions workflow to take our application, turn it into a Docker container, and push it to Azure Container Registry instance. And then the ARM template will create a app. I'm not sure what type of app I'm going to build yet. Maybe web app, maybe container app. Who knows? And use that container from Azure Container Registry. So it'll be a whole lot of fun. All right. So we did a lot here. We checked the .NET version of 60201 because that's the version of the container. We checked out our code. So we're just pulling the code down to this local machine or local build agent. We published our .NET application using .NET publish configuration release output out, and it created a copy of our application, that nice little out folder. Now here's the kick. Once this build agent is destroyed, we have no access to this published output. So we need to actually store it in some way. So if I go to job summary, there's nothing here to download everything from the job. So I need to rely on another built-in GitHub action. Now this one's fun. This is going to be called upload. This allows us to upload an artifact. Now, this one might need a couple parameters. It's basically actions upload artifact at version 3. And then they recommend 2 things: the name of the artifact, that's what we're going to see in the user interface, and then a path to either the artifact file or the entire directory. We're going to use the entire directory. You can use patterns and stuff, but today we're going to keep it simple. All right, so one more step, and I think we're done with this job. Uses at actions upload artifact at v3. Name, we'll call this upload, publish, upload, publish output with, and this is where we specify the name of the artifact. I'm going to call this web app, and then the path. We're going to upload that out folder. Save this. Create build artifact will be our commit message. We'll sync our changes up. All right, really exciting times. I'm breathing heavy right now, but I think we're ready. So we'll just jump in. I'm kind of glad somebody asked me about sequentially doing jobs. We're definitely going to be doing that next week. All right, so create build artifact. There's a build.NET project job. It's downloaded container image. It's going to check. Once the container image is ready, it'll check the .NET version. It'll check out the code. It'll publish a .NET web application, and then it has the new step, upload publish output. So it'll take the output of .NET publish and upload it to a build artifact. So just want you to see what that looks like. So we're publishing that .NET web application, and then it takes everything in that out folder, all 69 files, and creates a new artifact called web app. And then now it's uploading the files to that artifact, and the job is done. So if I hit summary, here's our completed job. Let's see if I refresh it. Oh, there we go. My scroll wheel wasn't working. I apologize about that. And there's our web app artifact. This artifact I could download, but it includes basically the output of that of running .NET Publish. This is a great way for us to be able to say, okay, well, let me pull the publish from that point in time and go double check, see what was going on. If we had a subsequent job, and probably not enough time to go through it today, but there's an opposite action called download artifact. I want to give you a little bit of taste of what we're going to do next week, without like spoiling everything. So we're gonna have a little bit of fun. Again, if you got questions, please throw them in the chat. We have hyperlinks to the GitHub gist of a lot of the code I'm writing, along with a Microsoft Learn module where you can replicate a lot of this yourself. So please, try those out. All right, so I have Windows Terminal open. I'm logged into Azure CLI. If I do AZ account show, it's going to show the details of my currently logged in, the subscription I'm using as the context of my commands. So I'll clear this. And I also have a really cool, nifty shell extension, OMyPosh, I believe is, that shows me where I'm logged in for as far as the Azure CLI is concerned. All right, so from here, I'm going to create a new resource group. So AZ group create, name, March 30, location, let's do West US. We'll create a new Azure resource group called March 30 in West US. If I go to the Azure portal and go to resource groups, there should be, if I refresh it, with my luck, it's taking a second to come up. We control F5. Let's do March 30. Yeah, I'm not sure why it didn't show up in my UI, but here's my March 30 resource group. Pretty exciting stuff. Now, here's where I want to really have some fun. I'm going to create a new app service plan. So AZ app service plan create. And for those who are like, how do you know these CLI commands? You can actually go look up the Azure CLI command. So if I say AZ group create, it'll take me to Microsoft Docs for the Azure CLI. So this is AZ group. You can see for different things like resource manager groups, Azure app service. There's if I go in here, web app and app service. We'll do app service plan create. We'll do web app create, all sorts of fun ones. But let's stick with AZ group create. It says location name. That's what we ran. That seemed to work. So from there, we'll go to Azure App Service. And we'll create a new app service plan. So AZ App Service Plan create. It needs a name and a resource group, but there's other optional arguments. Like for instance, we can indicate whether this app service plan is Linux or not. Today we will. So AZ App Service Plan create. Name. March plan. Resource group. March 30. Is Linux? Absolutely. enter, and we created our brand new app service plan. Now it takes a second, but it's going to create it. Just check and make sure there's no questions in the chat, and there we go. We can do the same thing with AZ Web App Create. So I'm going to documentation. I'm going to expand this web app node, and I can hit summary to see all the different ones. But there's AZ Web App Create. This one needs the name of the web application, the app service plan is tied to, and resource group, and it too has optional arguments. One of them being runtime. That's where we're going to have a lot of fun. So I'm just going to show you something really cool. I'm going to run the command incorrectly first. AZ Web App Create name. Sydney March 30. It's going to be the name. Plan. March plan. Resource group. March 30. And then I'm going to hit enter. Should fail. Basically going to say, hey, the app service plan is Linux. You need to specify either a deployment container image, a multi-container configuration file, like think of like a Docker Compose file. Container image could be like Docker Hub, Azure Container Registry, any other type of container registry, or specify a runtime, one of the built-in runtimes. And if you've never done that before, you can actually search for that. So there is a AZ Web App. If I got this correctly, it's AZ Web App list runtimes. Trying to make sure I have it's a lot of commands for web apps. AZ Web App list runtimes. Now you want to specify the OS. So we will do that. So AZ Web App list runtimes, Linux. It'll list all of the runtimes that are available. We are running a .NET 6 application, so it'll be .NET 6. So AZ Web App create name, Sydney March 30. That's my globally unique name. That's going to become a fully qualified domain name. The plan is March plan. Resource group is March 30. And the runtime, .NET. And if you do this vertical bar, that means something in PowerShell. So they allow you to use colon instead. .NET 6.0. And the command will know that you mean vertical bar there. It'll do the translation for you. And it's going to create our web app. And just so I'm showing you that I'm really creating stuff here. There's our March 30 resource group. If I refresh, there's our app service plan called March Plan. Go back to Windows Terminal. It's still thinking, still working really hard at creating that web app. There we go. So if I got this correct, if I go to apps, I'll see the Sydney March 30 web app, which is a type Linux. If I hit browse, it's going to take me to the landing page for app service plan web apps, which just say, hey, you successfully created a web app. Here's some things you can do. I'm not sure how fast that loading homepage is going to spin up, but it definitely takes you to that homepage for the web app. And so now we have a web app that we can deploy stuff to. And this is the basis of what we want to do. We want to actually upload our code to this web app. And so there's one last command I'll show you, AZ Web App Up. And these commands are the key to what we're going to do in our workflow. So there's a AZ Web App Up. And what it does is it creates a web app if you don't already have one, but deploy codes for your local machine. So we're already in our repo directory. So AZ Web App Up. We need a name. That's going to be Sydney March 30. Had to think about that for a second. Plan is called March Plan. OS type Linux. Runtime .NET 6.0. Before I run this, we'll talk about those two flags. If you don't specify them, it will try to guess what type of application this is and what type of operating system that you're deploying to. It'll probably get the operating system right, but the runtime can be all over the place. So if I know what runtime I want to run this on, I will specify that up front. All right, so looks like a March plan, a service plan, or a web app already exists. Is zipping up the local folder and put everything in there. It's starting a zip deployment, and the endpoint responded at 2:02. Your deployment has been created. So if I go to Sydney March 30 and go to Deployment Center, I'll see under logs that we're deploying from a push zip file. I can actually look at the logs and see that it's cleaning up previous deployments, and then after a while, it's going to have another step where it's actually running the deployments. So this is where it's copying the files. It's going to actually run the .NET deployment to this instance. All right. So This is where things get fun because I showed you how to use the Azure CLI to deploy a web app, but you're saying, and this is where I challenge you to try this yourself and have a lot of fun. We can use the Azure CLI right here within our GitHub Actions workflow. So a couple things have happened. We have a .azure folder with our deployment configuration. It's useful, but if I don't want that, I can just add that to my git ignore folder. So .azure. Now we'll just make sure that we don't have to worry about committing that by accident. Somebody says, should we create these resources like the web app plan with Bicep? You are definitely you're definitely hitting on what next week's going to be about. We're going to do the same exact thing, but we're going to use Bicep templates to create these resources. And then we're going to deploy at the same time as creating them. So it looks like, looks like my deployment is done already. So if I go to Azure App Service or refresh, hold on, let me go refresh the log. Successful deployment. So if I hit browse, I don't know if I need to control F5. I'm not sure why it's not refreshing for me. But we created successful deployment. Let me show you how to do this in GitHub Actions. So I'm gonna create a new job called push to Azure. I'm gonna give it the name publish Azure resources. And we're gonna run this on any operating system. It's running on Windows latest. All right, so steps. This is where things get fun because we can use some of the steps we already have. So check it out, code. Let's add that step. I apologize about the sneezing. Now, GitHub has their own actions repo, but Microsoft has their own actions. If you go to github.com/Azure, there's a wonderful login. Excuse me, I just drink some water real quick. I apologize about that. The Azure organization has a really cool login action that works just like one of the GitHub actions. You can use actions, whether first party from GitHub or third party from Microsoft. And it's really simple. We use Azure login at V1 and we specify service principal credentials ideally. So I'm just going to copy this because that just looks easy enough. So it uses the Azure login and it needs a secret called Azure credentials. Well, I can go into GitHub and in this March 30 repo, use the settings to go to secrets for my actions and create a new repository secret called Azure credentials. Now you may say, okay, that's fine and dandy, but where are you getting these Azure credentials? Well, this is where the Azure CLI comes to rescue today. So I clear my screen. I will use the AZADSP create for RBAC command. Now, that probably looks like garbled nonsense if you've never seen that before. But just like we looked at the documentation for Azure web apps, we could definitely do this for other Azure services. So for Azure Active Directory, there's AZAD. ADSP is for service principals. And it has a command called create for RBAC. And this will allows us to create a role-based access control without a role assignment. We can give it a unique display name. We can give it a unique contributor role and then a scope for that role, whether that's a resource group or more than one resource group. And then it'll output the JSON credential data that we need. So let's do that. So AZADSP create for role-based access control. The name of this can be anything we want. I'll call this March 30 principal user. It's not really a user, it's a principal, but still. SDK off because we're going to be using this with the CLI. Role, I want a contributor that can create stuff or make changes to resources. I could probably tighten this role even more to somebody who can't create any resource on this resource group or on this specific resource, but can modify it. But contributor is fine for today. For scopes, I need to point it at my resource group and have contributor access to the resource group. So I'll go back into Azure, go back, and you know what? March 30 resource group. And I can go in and build the scope out manually, or it's right here in the URL. So we can go to subscriptions, the GUID for my subscription, resource groups, March 30. That's my scope. So if I go in to terminal and type that in, hit enter, it's going to create a new surface principal. Oh, let me make sure I get this right. Resource groups, subscriptions. Oh, I might have forgotten the slash in front of subscriptions. I'm just double checking my notes. Subscription slash the subscription GUID, resource groups slash the name of the resource group. Let's try that one more time. And there we go. This is JSON. And I'm not too worried about this because I'm going to destroy this as soon as we're done. I'm going to copy this JSON. And remember, we created a secret in GitHub. I'm going to paste this as the value of my secret. And there we go. We now have a secret that we can access in our actions workflow. Now, notice we're not able to read it within the portal. We can only update the value. So this will allow us to log into Azure. And we could just test out right now. Log into Azure. Sync the changes up from my local repository to GitHub. And we are going to go to GitHub Actions, log into Azure. And I'm not going to worry about the build.NET project. They're running parallel since neither one of them depends on the other. I'll just go to publish Azure resources. And again, I'm running this on a Windows agent. Again, that's arbitrary too. It's just really up to us how we want to set this up. So here we go. Publish Azure resources, setting up the job now. And again, if you got questions, throw them in the chat. We're coming kind of close to wrapping up for today. And I'll talk about what we'll be covering next week. So Azure login, we've logged in successfully. Or I'm hoping we logged in successfully, still running. I'll close checkout code. Login successful. And so we know we were able to log in successfully. Let's actually run a command. So we've checked out our code and we logged into the Azure CLI. Our resources already exist, so we should just be able to just run. And I'm going to just do a multi-line command. So I'll use this vertical bar to indicate a multi-line command. AZ web app up. And this is the name. Should be Sydney March 30. And we can use variables. We can use a unique name each time. The plan is March plan. The OS type is Linux. The runtime is .NET 6.0. I'll call this push app content to app service. And for those who are interested, the app service engine is called, I believe it's called Oryx, Oryx. That's the one that actually takes the code, detects which SDK it is, and does the full build, all that fun stuff. All right, so publish Azure App. Hopefully I don't have any typos. We're syncing this up to our remote GitHub repository. Going back to GitHub Actions. There it is, publish Azure App, publish Azure resources. I'm just wondering, just out of curiosity, if the old version application has been published yet. I'll have to figure out what I did wrong here, but we are publishing the Azure app. So I suspect even though we'll publish it, we'll still see that placeholder page. I'll probably have some type of config file wrong in my actual application itself and nothing here in the GitHub Actions workflow. But I definitely still wanted you to see how that publish will work. So checking out our code. Then it's going to log into the Azure CLI. That's Azure login. Looks like the .NET project's already built, so we already have the build artifact for the .NET project from .NET Publish. Once it's done logging in Azure, we will run AZ Web App up just like we did on our local machine. There we go. Login's almost done. And now it's running AZ Web App up. Looks like I have a typo somewhere. Oh, I forgot the indicator that this is a multi-line command. So I will fix that now. Um, yeah, I forgot these little slashes in multi-line command. Fix multi-line command typo. I was due for a demo bug. This was running way too smooth today. All right, changes up, and we are going to go to the GitHub action. So while that's running, I'm gonna just show my slide one more time. Um, So next week, we are going to combine everything we learned today on YAML GitHub, along with everything we learned last week on ARM, Bicep templates, and we are going to do and Azure CLI. We are going to build a GitHub action next week. I don't know why I said tomorrow. Next week, where we are going to have a lot of fun. We are going to build a GitHub action that has one job. It takes our .NET web application, creates a Docker container out of it, and pushes it to a container registry, ideally Azure Container Registry in our example. Then we're going to have a second job that waits for the first job to complete, and then uses the same tag for the container image for the first job, and it will do a Bicep deployment where it creates a new, and we'll probably do this with container apps, maybe web apps. I'm not sure yet. We'll deploy we'll deploy a web application resource, and then use that container that we deployed earlier with our web application resource. So really looking forward to that. We're going to build upon everything we learned. If you've finished watching the session, you haven't seen the first session, please, go check out our first session. We're going to take everything, combine it together, and show you just how you can do a really, really awesome combined workflow. So I probably still have a typo in here somewhere. I'm checking my notes, make sure I haven't done anything silly. Yeah, I'm just not 100% sure why I'm getting these unary typo errors here, but just to show you that the Azure CLI actually works, because I have no idea what's going on here. I'll just show you AZ account show. I apologize, something I can't fix live on air. I'll make sure that we have the CLI step. Again, right now, since I'm live, I'm not 100% sure what mistake I'm making. But show Azure current account. I just want to be able to at least show you that everything is running as expected. That we are truly logged into CLI. We can run CLI commands like easy account show. And then after that, that would pretty much be it for today. I'm looking at the chat to see if there's any more questions. And again, apologize for this demo error at the end. I'll probably post a comment on this video when it's posted with the correction. I'll definitely update the show notes because it's eluding me why it is why I have a typo in this easy web app up command. So we're looking at this checkout code. It's going to do the login, which takes about 30 seconds to a minute. And then from there, it's going to run an easy account show. All right, there we go. It's setting to public cloud, and then it's going to log in and persist so that we're credentialed. And it ran easy account show and printed out information about the subscription account I'm logged into. So the CLI part definitely works. You can run CLI commands. It's something about the way I typed out that multi-line command that probably going to look obvious to me an hour from now. But thank you all for attending. Really excited to show you this. And again, just looking back on our slides, next week we will definitely be focusing on taking this GitHub action, building two jobs. The first job to create a Docker container image, and the second job to push that container image to using or not push, but using a Bicep template to create a resource that uses a container image, and that resource will pull the container image. So we're pushing the container image from our build agent to our container registry, and our Azure resource will pull that container image. So can you tell I'm really excited to really show you that, because it's something that I've never actually demoed before, but I've done a couple times, and I think it's just a really, really neat workflow. So thank you all again. I think Rebecca's jumping back on about to tell you
Hello.
all about it.
Hello. So just to reiterate, next week, April 6th, I dropped into the chat a link to our main meetup page, Find Your Local Location. I've also shared the New York meetup event page for his upcoming session. I dropped a lot of links into the chat. So our Learn module that was worked off of today, his GitHub repo just for you to kind of follow along if you want to revisit any of that. We have a playlist on YouTube, so you can watch the previous session on demand. This session will be available on demand in the next couple days. And then also the upcoming session, which you can save and then tune in for next week. If you are not familiar with the Microsoft Reactor and you just happen to find us random, I dropped a survey into the link the chat as well. So just if you have the opportunity to let us know a little bit more about you, do feel free to submit that survey, enter event code 15596, and then join our community. If you're not familiar, we are on Meetup. We're on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. We offer ongoing community sessions every week, all day. Depending on where you're tuning in from, there's sessions available in all time zones. So thank you so much, Sydney. This was fantastic again. Sydney's been participating with the Reactor program and contributing a lot of amazing content over the course of the last couple years since we moved virtual, which has been so great. We hope to continue that relationship perhaps in the future as well, and see you next week.
All right. Well, thanks again, and thanks everyone.